Right now, while you read this, something is being prepared for tonight. Not by you, not for you, against you. The moment your eyes close and your breathing slows and the last flicker of waking consciousness dissolves into the dark, there is a transition that happens in the invisible architecture of your existence. Your body stays behind, dense and still, anchored to the mattress. But the part of you that is truly you, the luminous thread of awareness that animates the flesh, begins to move. It crosses a threshold that has no door, no border, no warning sign. And that crossing, that unguarded, unprotected, unremarkable moment that the modern world has reduced to the word sleep, is exactly when they move in. You have been told that insomnia is a nervous system disorder. You have been told that waking up exhausted after 8 hours of unconsciousness is a sign that you need more magnesium, better sleep hygiene, a white noise machine, a different pillow. You have been told that the paralysis that freezes your body in the dead of night while your mind screams in silence is simply a glitch in the REM cycle, a misfiring of motor neurons, a residue of evolutionary biology, a quirk of the mammalian brain caught between two states. The science is clean, the vocabulary is clinical, and it is designed to make sure you never ask the question that would change everything. What if the body is not the problem? What if the exhaustion you carry into every morning is not produced from within, but extracted from without? There is a layer of reality that predates every religious institution ever built on this earth. It existed before the first church was constructed, before the first sermon was translated, before the first creed was carved into stone and handed to the masses as the complete and final word of heaven. Ancient navigators of the invisible called it the astral plane, the etheric field, the space between worlds. It is not metaphor. It is the actual territory that your consciousness crosses every single night without armor, without a guide, and without the knowledge that was once available, and then, deliberately, removed. The architects of the modern spiritual prison understood something that took centuries to fully suppress. They understood that a soul in transit is a soul exposed. When the waking mind releases its grip and the conscious identity goes slack, the barriers that ordinarily insulate your energy field from external interference grow thin. The frequency of your awareness drops. Your vibrational signature, normally animated by intention and alert thought, becomes something closer to an open frequency, a signal broadcasting into the dark without encryption. And what moves through those frequencies, what has always moved through them, are intelligences that feed. They are not demons in the theatrical sense the medieval church constructed to keep populations in obedient fear. That image, the horned figure with theatrical malice, was itself part of the architecture of control, a cartoon designed to make the real mechanism seem absurd. The texts that were buried in clay jars in the Egyptian desert, sealed away from the burning libraries and the inquisitorial fires, used a different name. They called them Archons, administrators of the lower world. Intermediary intelligences spawned not from light but from the Demiurge, the false architect who mistook himself for the supreme god and constructed this dense, material plane as a containment system for the sparks of divine light trapped inside human bodies. The Archons do not require your belief to operate. That is the first thing to understand. Their machinery runs regardless of whether you accept their existence. The harvesting of vital energy, what older traditions called the pneuma, the prana, the ruach, happens at the level of your field, not at the level of your theology. You can be a committed materialist and still wake up every morning feeling as though something invisible pulled something essential out of you while you were unconscious. Millions of people describe exactly this sensation and are handed a prescription. What they are not handed is the knowledge that the sensation is accurate. The paralysis is not a neurological accident. It is the signature of contact, the body's autonomic system locking down in response to an interference that the conscious mind is not awake to process. The sudden terror with no image, the pressure on the chest, the sense of a presence at the edge of the room that dissolves the moment the eyes open. These are not hallucinations produced by an overactive amygdala. They are the traces of an encounter that the waking mind is not calibrated to remember, but the body never forgets. The animal nervous system knows. It registers the intrusion even when the intellect refuses to name it. And the exhaustion, the particular quality of waking tired that is different from physical fatigue, that heaviness that sits behind the eyes and weighs on the chest before the day has even begun, that sensation of having worked through the night at something you cannot recall. That is not sleep deprivation. That is return. A consciousness coming back from the transit depleted because the crossing was not safe, because no boundary was set, because no protocol was activated before the threshold was crossed. This is where the suppression becomes precise. Because a protocol existed, instructions were given, not by a priest, not by a theologian with a stake in keeping you dependent on institutional intercession, but in a text that was excluded from the canonical Bible not because it was fraudulent, but because it was functional. Because what it contained, if practiced, made the individual sovereign over their own field. And a sovereign soul does not need a mediator. A sovereign soul cannot be easily managed, taxed, terrorized, or harvested. The Gospel of Thomas has been studied, translated, and filed away in academic libraries for decades since the Nag Hammadi discovery. Scholars parse its logia as philosophical sayings, mystical aphorisms, Gnostic wisdom literature. But there are layers in those words that the academic framework is structurally incapable of seeing. Because the academic framework does not believe in the astral plane, does not account for archons, and does not ask what happens to human consciousness between midnight and 4 in the morning. The text does. Hidden within its structure, encoded in the syntax of the Coptic original, are the exact conditions under which the monada, the divine spark of self, becomes invisible to the frequencies that hunt it in transit. Not invisible through magic, invisible through precision, through a specific configuration of intention activated at the precise moment the waking mind is about to surrender. A firewall, ancient, forgotten, and recoverable. What that firewall contains, how it was encoded in the suppressed logia, and why activating it in the 5 minutes before sleep rewrites the terms of the crossing entirely. That is what the institution that called itself the Church of Light worked hardest to bury. Because a sleeping population with no protection is a population that can be drained indefinitely. And a population that has never been told it is being drained will spend its entire life looking for the source of its exhaustion in the wrong direction. What was written in those hidden lines does not belong to theology. It belongs to you. And what it unlocks in the hours when your body lies still and your consciousness moves through the dark will make the rest of what you think you know about sleep feel like a door you never knew existed finally swinging open. The protocol itself was not lost by accident. It was extracted, piece by piece, from every tradition that dared to preserve it, and what remained was scattered across 3 separate logia that no modern translation has ever read as a single sequence. Until now. The Gospel of Thomas does not open with a greeting. It does not begin with genealogy or prophecy or the announcement of a birth. It opens with a warning. The very first line before any teaching, before any dialogue, states that whoever finds the interpretation of these sayings will not taste death, not in the afterlife, not eventually. The implication is immediate and operational. The knowledge itself is the protection. The interpretation is the shield. And the specific knowledge that was excised, the fragment that connects Logian 37 to Logian 50, in a sequence that the canonical tradition deliberately fractured, is the exact mechanism by which a soul in transit becomes unreachable. Logian 37 was preserved, but its context was amputated. In it, the disciples ask when the kingdom will be revealed, and the answer given is, when you undress without shame and trample your garments underfoot. Every commentary written in the last 500 years reads this as metaphor, spiritual nudity, the shedding of ego, a poetic gesture toward inner liberation. But the Coptic root word used for garments in the original manuscript is not the word for ego or pride or social persona. It is the word used specifically for the subtle body, the energetic sheath that surrounds the physical form and crosses the threshold first when the waking mind releases. The instruction is not philosophical. It is procedural. It is telling you exactly what to do with the vehicle that transits the astral plane before you sleep. You remove the frequency signature that makes you visible. This is not mystical abstraction. Every intelligence that operates in the lower astral registers, including the Archonic administrators that the Demiurgic system deploys, navigates by resonance. They do not see with eyes. They locate by frequency. Your unprotected subtle body carries the accumulated vibrational residue of your entire day. The anger from the commute, the anxiety from the news cycle, the grief that never finished processing, the desire that was suppressed before lunch. That residue is not neutral. It is a signal. It broadcasts your location in the field with the precision of a sonar ping, and what hunts by sonar will find it every time. The instruction in Logion 37 is the first step of the firewall. Before sleep, you do not visualize white light. You do not recite a prayer written by an institution with a vested interest in your continued dependence. You perform a specific act of energetic stripping. You mentally locate the subtle body, the field that extends approximately 18 inches beyond the skin in every direction, and you systematically withdraw the frequency residue of the day, not by pushing it outward, by pulling it inward, compressing it back toward the core of the monada, back toward the luminous point of original divine light that exists at the center of every human being who carries a genuine spark and has not had it fully extracted. That compression creates silence in the field, and silence in the field is invisibility in the astral. The Archons pass over a silent field the way a predator walks past prey that has gone completely still, not because the prey has disappeared, but because the frequency they track has ceased broadcasting. This is the first mechanism. And it was the first thing removed from every public-facing spiritual tradition that encountered it. Because a population that can go silent in the field is a population that stops being a reliable food source. But Logion 37 is only the opening sequence of the firewall, and the suppression was careful enough to ensure that the second component was separated from it by 13 logia. Enough distance to make the connection invisible to a casual reader, enough proximity to be recoverable by someone who knows what they are looking for. Logion 50 is where the extraction protocol becomes defense architecture. In it, the disciples are told what to say if they are asked where they came from. The answer prescribed is precise. We came from the light, the place where the light came into being by itself. If they ask who you are, the answer is, we are its children and we are the chosen of the living Father. And if they ask for a sign of the Father in you, the answer is, it is movement and rest. Every Gnostic scholar who has examined this logion reads it as a statement of cosmological identity, a creed, a confession, an affirmation of divine origin meant for use in some kind of initiatory ceremony. What they do not read, because the framework of ceremony and liturgy blinds them to it, is that this is a transit protocol. These are not words to be spoken aloud in a ritual context. These are the specific declarations to be activated internally, in the mind, in the precise 5-minute window between the decision to sleep and the moment of actual threshold crossing. The question being anticipated in Logion 50 is not from a fellow human being asking about your theology. The question is from the intelligences encountered in the liminal space. The Archons, in the texts recovered from Nag Hammadi, are explicitly described as interrogators, gatekeepers of the lower planes who challenge the ascending or transiting soul and attempt to determine whether it can be detained, redirected, or harvested. The protocol in Logion 50 is not a creed. It is a password, a frequency declaration that reconfigures the vibrational signature of the subtle body from the residue-laden pattern of a material plane human into the resonant signature of a monada that knows its origin. And here is what the religious institution understood and feared. An intelligence that knows its origin cannot be claimed by a system that depends on its confusion. The Archons operate through a specific mechanism that the Demiurgic tradition has always exploited. They induce what the Valentinian Gnostics called hylic sleep, a heaviness of identification with the material world so complete that the soul forgets it is light moving through density, and begins to believe it is the density itself. When that forgetting is deep enough, when the soul in transit has no language for what it actually is, it moves through the astral plane as a disoriented signal. And a disoriented signal is a claimable signal. It can be intercepted, redirected, drained over hours that the waking mind will never remember. The combination of Logian 37 and Logian 50, executed in sequence in those 5 minutes before sleep, constructs something that has no equivalent in any publicly available spiritual practice. The first strips the vibrational residue that broadcasts your location. The second replaces it not with silence alone, but with a specific resonant declaration of origin that the Archonic frequencies cannot interface with. They are tuned to harvest the confused. They are tuned to the frequency of forgetting, the frequency of a consciousness that has remembered what it is, that knows it came from the light, that identifies as the child of the living Father, that rests in the movement between planes, is not a frequency they can process. It does not compute as food. And the third component of the firewall, the one that connects these two logia into an active system rather than two separate instructions, was not preserved in the text itself. It was encoded in what was removed between them. Scholars have catalogued a series of logia that exist in fragmentary form in the Greek papyrus fragments of Thomas, discovered decades before Nag Hammadi, logia that simply do not appear in the Coptic version in their complete form. One of these fragments, cross-referenced with a passage in the books of Jael, a text so dangerous to the controllers of early Christianity that even its title was expunged from the list of known heretical writings for over a millennium, contains a specific instruction about breath. Not breathing as a physical act, breathing as a synchronization mechanism between the physical body being left behind and the subtle body crossing the threshold. A rhythm of 7 slow inhalations during which the Logian 37 stripping is performed, followed by a single suspended breath during which the Logian 50 declaration is made internally, followed by natural release and the allowing of sleep. 7. 1. Release. The pattern is not arbitrary. 7 corresponds to the number of Archonic spheres described in every major Gnostic cosmology. The 7 planetary intelligences who administer the lower material world and whose jurisdiction ends at the boundary of the 8th sphere, the Ogdoad, where the light of the true Father begins. The suspended breath corresponds to the moment of crossing, the held instant between planes where the soul is neither here nor there, neither in the body nor fully in transit, and where the declaration of origin must be active and resonant before the crossing is complete. The release is the seal. The natural exhalation, unforced, unperformed, is the energetic signature of a consciousness that no longer needs to hold itself together against the pressure of the lower world. It is the relaxation of the soul that knows it is protected. And that specific quality of release, not the theatrical surrender of a meditation script, but the genuine unwinding of a field that has completed its preparation, is itself a frequency that the astral plane reads as passage granted. The system is complete, and the reason you have never heard it, despite the Gospel of Thomas having been available in bookstores for 50 years, is that no one was meant to read 3 logia as a single operational protocol. They were meant to be read as philosophy, admired as mystical poetry, filed as ancient curiosity. The knowledge was hidden not by burning the text but by burning the context, by destroying the interpretive tradition that knew how to read the map. What happens on the other side of that protocol, what the astral plane looks like for a consciousness moving through it with a fully activated firewall, and what the Archons do when they encounter a field they cannot harvest, is where this goes next. and it is not what any tradition that kept you passive has ever been willing to describe. There is a specific moment, approximately 90 minutes into protected sleep, when the transit deepens past the zone the Archons can reach. What happens in that space, and why you will wake from it with something you have never woken with before, has only been recorded once, in a text that was burned in 3 separate locations across 2 continents before a single copy survived. The first time a consciousness crosses in silence, the crossing itself feels different. There is no jolt, no sudden paralysis announcing interference, no weight descending on the chest, no presence assembling itself in the corner of the room with the particular quality of cold that the body recognizes before the mind does. The transition happens the way it was always meant to happen: clean, undetected, fluid, a luminous thread moving through a space that has nothing to catch it because the space has nothing to read. The field is silent. The origin is declared. The breath has sealed the passage. And what moves through the lower astral toward the deeper planes carries no residue, no confusion, no signal that broadcasts availability to be consumed. The Archons do not disappear. That is important to understand. The firewall does not destroy them, does not banish them, does not wage war against the administrative architecture of the demiurgic lower world. It does something more precise and more devastating to their operation. It renders you irrelevant to their system, a harvesting intelligence that navigates by frequency and finds nothing to interface with, does not pursue. It redirects. It moves toward the next available signal, the next unprotected consciousness crossing the threshold without preparation, without silence, without knowing what it is. The Archons require confusion to operate. They require the soul to have forgotten its origin. The moment that forgetting is reversed, even temporarily, even only for the duration of a single night's transit, the entire mechanism of extraction loses its purchase on you. What the Valentinian texts describe happening in the space beyond the 7th Archonic sphere is not reward. It is not heaven in any sense the institutional tradition would recognize or endorse. It is restoration. The consciousness moving through unimpeded begins to recover something that the accumulated drain of unprotected transits had slowly removed. Not memories, not visions, not mystical experiences in the theatrical sense. Something quieter and more structural than that. It recovers coherence. The monada, the original divine spark at the center of the field, begins to vibrate at the frequency it held before the first unprotected crossing degraded it. Before the first night of invisible extraction left a deficit that was never named and therefore never addressed. Before the decades of waking, exhausted, trained the body to accept depletion as its natural condition. This is what the protected crossing